On Christmas Eve, while surrounded by my siblings and their children, I finally presented my father with the custom timepiece I had been putting money aside for all year. He opened the box, sneered, and loudly exclaimed for all to hear, "Is this tacky junk supposed to impress me? I guess you're still worthless after all these years." My stepbrother erupted in laughter, while my mother pretended to ignore it, and I merely whispered, "Merry Christmas," before leaving. A year later, he attempted to reach me repeatedly, 19 calls each day. He eventually grasped what I had done. I don't know if it's peculiar to start off with, but has anyone experienced how some individuals just disrupt the atmosphere for no reason, almost like it's a sport? My dad, Coulter, does this every single holiday. If he hears laughter from another room, he somehow finds a way to pull all attention back to himself. Last year, he made a remark about how he wouldn't get out of bed for less than 10 gifts, which no one found funny, yet he just repeated it louder twice. I was hoping for a change this year, at least in my case. I'd set aside funds for months, literally, since last February, to order this decent custom watch for him. It wasn't extravagant or cheap. It was simply nice. There's a small engraving on the inside with an old saying he used to share with us when we were young. Honestly, it cost more than I'd like to admit since I aimed for the finer details, and I'm certainly not wealthy. Still, I thought maybe this gift would truly resonate, could spark a genuine moment. Who knows? There's always that foolish hope, right? The whole clan was there. Me, my sister Heather, my stepbrother Griffin, and their kids running about, with my mum Joanne feigning busyness in the kitchen, attempting to avoid being in Coulter's presence for most of the time. If you've grown up in families similar to mine, you understand the routine. Everyone glued to their phones, a football game playing on mute. I sat there, half watching my nephew attempt to show me a TikTok dance, honestly wishing I could have just opted to stay home and play games instead. But I had made a commitment to present the watch, so I waited until most of the gifts were unwrapped, not wanting it to become a spectacle. By that point, Griffin had already started on his second beer, throwing light jabs under his breath, nudging me as if I was in on the joke, but it was always at someone else's expense, usually mine. Dad sat in his chair like a king, while Heather struggled to soothe her youngest, who had a meltdown because he received the incorrect color controller. In the midst of the usual disorder, I casually handed Dad the box. Nothing fancy, just a box with a card attached. I remarked, "Hey, this is for you. Hope you enjoy it." He didn't even bother to look at me, merely glanced at the box, then at Griffin as if expecting a punchline. I caught Heather's eye, and I think she realized I had invested a lot into it because she had seen me fretting about shipping last week. When he opened it, for a fleeting moment, I caught a glimpse of surprise on his face, but then he lifted the watch, twisted it around in his hands, and immediately erupted. He laughed, but it was a hollow laugh, just a short, sharp sound saying, "Is this meant to impress me? This pathetic junk? You still don't understand, do you? After all these years?" And, as always, he said it loudly, ensuring everyone heard. Even the kids momentarily paused. I didn't look at Griffin, but I could hear him snickering like this was the best punchline he had ever encountered. Heather turned away, while Mom acted like she needed to check something in the kitchen, grabbing a bowl and leaving. I muttered, "Just Merry Christmas, Dad," low enough to know he'd hear it. My cheeks burned, but I aimed not to give him any satisfaction. I stood up and began to walk away, and Griffin called after me, "You forgot your dignity, man. Maybe check under the couch for it." I didn't even hesitate, just continued on, grabbed my jacket, and slammed the door behind me. It wasn't my proudest moment, yet I could feel my hands tremble, not from sorrow, but from sheer anger. I heard something crash behind me, most likely one of the kids dropping a juice box, but honestly, I didn't care. I sat in my car for what felt like an eternity, scrolling through my phone, debating whether I should go back inside and confront him. Then, I received a text from Heather. "Sorry. Nothing more. Just typical. No one ever stands up to him. Not really. Griffin always shadowed him, escaping accountability for everything. He was the one who crashed Dad's car last summer, and somehow I got blamed for not warning him about the awful intersection. Classic. Heather always freezes up, and Mum adopts this behavior of pretending everything is fine if she just ignores the issue long enough. Here's the thing. My dad has always treated me this way. He yearned for a son who was into his interests, sports, cars, the right taste in virtually everything. But I just wasn't that person. I was the quiet child, the one who read excessively and was indifferent to whatever game was on. He claimed it made him look bad, like he had failed. Griffin, being the favored son, despite being my stepbrother, fit the mold. People often say, "Oh, he's just tough on you because he cares." But it's not that at all. He revels in the power, enjoys the control, relishes the fact that he can elicit a reaction from me, or better yet, that I will simply endure it and leave. Then everyone else can return to normalcy. But not this time. Not anymore. I'm fed up with it, and I refuse to simply take it. I didn't drive home immediately. I just sat there, reflecting on how much time and money I had squandered trying to get this man to recognize me for even 5 seconds. And then, in an instant, I was done, totally finished. I texted my sister, asking if she was tired of this yet. No response, so I didn't return inside. I just drove away, unsure of where I was headed. Just out of the neighborhood, past the familiar gas station where Dad used to make me wash his truck for pocket money, then always claim I did it incorrectly. I blasted the music, probably far, too loudly, but I didn't care. I started pondering the point of being amicable if he was never going to change. I wasn't going to let him treat me this way anymore. I know everyone will suggest, "Oh, just cut him off, don't go back, set boundaries." Blah blah. But that's not sufficient. Not for this. I'm not about to fade away so he can go, around telling everyone I'm a loser or whatever. I want him to genuinely understand what it feels like to be excluded, to watch everyone else progress without him. I want him to recognize that he can't dominate every room just because he's loudest. I want him to realize he lost something significant. I arrive home, toss my jacket onto the couch, and begin making notes on my phone. Actual notes, mapping out how the family finances work, who genuinely communicates with whom, what favors people owe him. I'm not even contemplating sleep. I'm solely considering how to ensure he's the one who feels left out next time, not me. I know Griffin will jabber away, and Mom will pretend she didn't hear anything, while Heather sits on the sidelines. But I don't care. I'm done letting him achieve victory by default. So, this is where I stand. I'm not seeking advice. I just needed to express this because, to be honest, I'm not letting it slide. Not this year, not ever again. If you've ever had that moment when you've simply reached your limit, I trust you understand what I mean. I'll provide updates if anything evolves, but for now, I'm crafting real plans. Update 1. So, something odd happened right after I shared that last outburst. I noticed my dad began sending me these passive-aggressive memes, the kind boomers share about real men and how kids these days can't take a joke. He never used to do this, almost as if he was gauging whether I'd respond or if he thought I'd simply wilt and apologize. But not this time. I guess I finally hit that age where I ponder what might happen if I actually stood my ground. So, I started making a list, not even joking, on my phone's notes app. Bullet points about what he genuinely cares about. His appearance in front of the extended family, having the final authority about financial matters, even those he doesn't, control, and hosting every holiday because he believes it solidifies his authority. First, needed someone on the inside, but not Griffin. No way. Heather, though not confrontational, abhors drama. I assumed she would likely block my number if I tried to pull her in, but I was still irked about Christmas, so I texted her anyway, asking, "Hey, do you genuinely enjoy attending every holiday gathering there, or are you just doing it for convenience?" She took a while to reply, the 3 dots appearing on and off for about 30 minutes before she responded, stating it was simply less hassle and expressed a wish we could meet somewhere else. I dropped a screenshot of that message into my notes and began contemplating what it would take to make that wish a reality. I started chatting with Aliyah, my cousin, since she's the only one who isn't afraid to point out when things are askew. I relayed to her the watch situation without even attempting to sugarcoat it. She promptly stated, "That's so typical of him. Why do we continue allowing him to run everything?" That sparked an idea for me. I initiated a group chat with her and Heather, not an overthrow or anything, just a casual discussion about, what if we organized a New Year's gathering at my place instead? Heather responded anxiously, saying, "I don't want to hurt Mum's feelings," but Aliyah was all on board, saying, "We can just explain it's easier with the kids, less driving." I imagine she mostly wanted an excuse to avoid the drive and any ensuing drama. Eventually, Heather relented, but kept insisting, "I don't want to stir the pot." I assured her, "No drama, just a low-key hangout, potluck style, nothing extravagant." After that, I messaged Mum, offering, "Hey, I'll host if you need a break." She just double-tapped the message, classic Joanne, never wanting to be the one to refuse, but at the same time, not giving a definitive yes. When New Year's arrived, everyone except Dad and Griffin gathered at my house. The kids were thrilled. The stress was lessened. Aliyah brought cupcakes, and Heather's husband was laid back. It was genuinely pleasant. Dad began inundating the group chat with, "So what's the plan for next weekend?" But nobody replied. I posted a picture of the kids engaged in Mario Kart, and he responded with a thumbs up. But then there was silence for several days. Griffin later messaged me, claiming I wouldn't get away with it, but I left him on red. Then the bizarre behavior escalated. Dad called me, not to apologize, but to accuse, stating, "I heard you're trying to create a rift in the family. Think you're better than me?" I queried, "What does it matter whether we're at your place or mine?" He retorted, "It's tradition," to which I replied, "It's not a law." He hung up, and Griffin's jabs began to surface too. He posted stories on Instagram with sayings like, "Some people forget who fed them," tagging me in old photos from our childhood at Dad's place, whatever. I ignored it, but began to collect screenshots, not out of interest in the drama, but to remember how they behave when they're no longer in control. Watching them scramble had a strangely satisfying quality. Weeks passed, and I noticed Dad engaging in strange behavior with the group texts, adding people, removing people, and creating new threads. At one point, I even received 3 separate invites to the same family dinner, each from a different chat. I began replying only in the chat that excluded him, and gradually, people followed suit. Heather was nervous. Mum appeared somewhat disengaged, but Aliyah was loving it. She even set up a poll to decide where to host Easter, and everyone voted for anywhere except Dad's. Meanwhile, I started investigating the financial side of things. Dad had always overseen the little family trust established by my grandmother, not due to being financially savvy, but because no one had bothered to change it. I asked Heather if she understood how it functioned, and she said, "I think there's a clause about needing a majority vote if anyone wants to make changes." Thus, I delved into the documents, and sure enough, it was true. It required 3 signatures to modify the trustee. I sent Heather screenshots, and she hesitated, saying she didn't want to make it messy. I assured her, "We don't need to create a spectacle, just sign it and transfer it to a neutral party." After a few days, she finally agreed, and we filled out the paperwork, got them notarized, and submitted them. Nothing flashy, just completed. Dad quickly became aware. He bombarded me with a barrage of texts in all caps. "You're making a grave error. You don't even understand what you're doing. You're letting everyone down." Then, he called me, but I ignored it. He called Heather instead. She picked up, only to hear him shout, "Next thing I receive is a text from her. It's absurd. Why did you pull me into this?" I called her back to explain that it wasn't about revenge, but about preventing him from using the trust as leverage every time someone desired change. She calmed down but said, "He won't just let this drop, right?" I told her I hoped he didn't. Not long after, Griffin confronted me at a family brunch. He tried pushing me when I walked in, accusing, "You're ruining everything." I replied, "You've never even cared about the family matters. You just enjoy being Dad's favorite." He shoved me again, and I reciprocated. Heather intervened, instructing us both to stop, but he stormed out, slamming the door like a classic move. After that encounter, Dad stopped inviting me to events. Here's the thing. When you're the host, people start coming to you with their problems. Suddenly, I was the one receiving messages about who was bringing what, who needed to crash at my place, and who required help picking up a cake. I'm not even adept at navigating this stuff, but it's astonishing how quickly people adapt when the atmosphere shifts. I began noticing Dad's friends were also absent of late. He usually gathered them for poker or other activities, but now it was predominantly just him and Griffin. Occasionally, I spotted them at the store, but they'd merely nod and keep moving. Mom visited my place with cookies, acting as if nothing was amiss, but she refrained from mentioning Dad unless I prompted her. I learned from Aliyah that he had been telling people I was going through a rough patch, which I found amusing. Heather informed me he'd been requesting she persuade me to reconcile, but she firmly stated she wouldn't intervene. The only genuinely infuriated one was Griffin, as he continued to send me memes about family loyalty and traitors lurking in the yard's grass. I blocked him for a week, then unblocked him at Heather's request, only to block him again after he tagged me in a Facebook rant. Dad tried to guilt-trip me over the trust, asserting, "You don't know what you're doing. You're going to ruin everything." I ignored it, letting it go to voicemail. Heather told me he had begun complaining to her about finances, claiming he could no longer afford things easily. I told her that was not my issue. Aliyah laughed, suggesting perhaps he would finally have to ask for help instead of merely assuming he was entitled to it. It wasn't like I had decimated him or anything, but the energy had shifted. He no longer dictated the family dynamics by default. He didn't have the final say on when or where we gathered. He couldn't wield money as a means to manipulate people into compliance. Griffin remained angry, but honestly, he was always angry about something. Mom continued her routine of pretending everything was fine, yet now she approached me first whenever she needed something resolved. I know Dad isn't going to stop trying, but neither will I. I'm not simply going to let it slide. I want him to feel it every time he realizes he no longer wields authority. The last thing I received was a text from Dad saying, "Hope you're happy." I responded with a thumbs up emoji. No further reply from him. I'll provide updates if it escalates, but frankly, I'm patiently awaiting his next move, as I'm not backing down. Not this time. Update 2. Here's something unexpected. My dad began showing up at events he previously never cared about, suddenly present at my cousin's kids' soccer games, acting like he had always been involved. He shook hands and chatted people up, laughing at jokes he never acknowledged before. I stood there, coffee in hand, observing him try to rally support, and honestly, it was awkward. He kept stealing glances my way, yet I offered nothing in response, instead engaging Aliyah in conversation about anything else. It dawned on me that he wasn't merely angry, he was actually anxious about losing his hold on the family, something entirely new. Griffin, of course, continued his "Edgar's ruining everything" campaign, bombarding me with long texts about how I was fracturing the family and tagging me in nostalgic photos from our childhood, as if we'd been the best of friends, wildly ironic. Eventually, he cornered me in the parking lot post-game, closing the distance to the point where I could smell the vape he had been puffing all day. He told me, "You're never going to win." I told him to step back. He shoved me again. I retaliated, and when he attempted to confront me face to face, I simply maneuvered around him. His frustration mounted as he slapped the mirror on my car while I drove off. The group chats were now a chaotic disarray. Dad kept spinning up new threads. Heather texted, saying she was receiving 5 different invitations to family dinners this month, all stemming from distinct chats, none of which included me unless they were mass texts. Aliyah found it hilarious, claiming he was playing chess with checkers pieces. Mom remained neutral, doubling tapping messages and dropping off food whenever she thought no one was around. Then, the tension escalated. Dad reached out to me out of the blue one day, wanting to discuss the trust. He said, "You don't understand the situation. You're going to regret your decisions." I reminded him it was a majority vote. He replied, "That's not how family operates." I answered, "Maybe not your version, but I'm through with yours." He hung up. Next, I heard from some of his old golf buddies. One messaged me on Facebook asking, "Hey, your dad's been saying you're having some sort of crisis. Do you need assistance?" I merely replied, "No thanks, we're okay." When I asked Heather if she was receiving similar messages, she confirmed she was. He was also asking her to sway me into making amends. She stated, "I'm exhausted from being in the middle. Just do what you intend to do." Griffin attempted to orchestrate a family intervention, no joke, claiming we all needed to meet at his place to clear the air. I told him if Dad wanted to talk, he could contact me directly. Griffin erupted with texts in all caps, asserting, "You're afraid to face the family." I simply departed from the chat. Heather exited shortly after. Aaliyah posted a meme about family gatherings being merely group gaslighting sessions, causing Griffin to block her for a week. A week later, Dad attempted to hold a substantial Sunday lunch in a traditional style, inviting the entire extended family. Heather and Aaliyah informed me they wouldn't attend, and I felt the same. Mum showed up, but only stayed for about an hour. Before long, Dad bombarded my phone with messages stating, "How could you betray me like this? This is entirely your fault. You're ripping us apart." I didn't respond. I texted Heather instead, who told me he had paced around the house, not speaking much to anyone, frustrated that nobody else attended besides Griffin. Aaliyah said her dad, my uncle, remarked that the lunch had been the dullest and most awkward they'd experienced in years. Now Dad was furious, but he still believed he could mend things with money. He started offering to assist with expenses, like miraculously texting Heather he would cover her car repairs if she joined him for dinner, while Aaliyah received a call about contributions toward the children's schooling. They both declined, with Heather insisting, "I'm not letting him buy his way back in." I told her, "You owe him nothing." Griffin continued attempting to straddle both sides, but even he was losing momentum. He called me and insisted, "You could just apologize, and this would all resolve itself." I countered, "What exactly am I apologizing for?" He replied, "You know what you did, just fix it." I hung up. Then, Dad escalated by reaching out to older relatives, my grandma, my Aunt Deborah, explaining he had no clue what transpired, claiming the kids just turned against him. Deborah called me, asking for an explanation, and I simply stated, "We're not doing family dinners at Dad's anymore, that's all." She seemed perplexed, but didn't pry into it further. Things got even stranger days later when Dad appeared at my door unannounced. I opened the door to find him standing there, arms crossed, asking, "Are you going to let me in, or what?" I told him, "You can speak from there." He attempted to step inside, but I blocked the entrance with my arm. He became infuriated, retorting, "After all I've done for you, this is how you treat me." I said, "After all you've done to me, this is how I'm finally standing up for myself." He glared, stating, "You'll regret this," before storming off and slamming my gate behind him. Following that incident, he began calling incessantly. I started ignoring the calls, which resulted in long voicemails, sometimes just silence with his breathing, sometimes rants accusing me of being selfish and ungrateful. I kept all the voicemails, not out of eagerness to listen, but so I had proof in case he attempted to twist the narrative later. I found his number popping up in my missed calls list, becoming increasingly irritating. In the meantime, the rest of the family grew exceptionally quiet. Heather distanced herself, stating she was fed up with the drama, while Aaliyah remarked, "Honestly, this is the calmest it's been in years." Mum swung by with groceries, skipping any mention of Dad, instead inquiring if I needed help fixing a leaky faucet. I repaired it on my own. One Saturday, while shopping, I unexpectedly crossed paths with one of Dad's old friends. He asked how things were going, indicating he hadn't seen Dad lately, and wondered if everything was all right. I simply replied, "Things change. People move on." The man nodded, suggesting, "Your dad always talked a big game. I guess it finally caught up to him." I received an invite to a group chat from a cousin I hadn't heard from in months. It turned out Dad attempted to initiate a new family traditions thread, but nobody joined, aside from Griffin and an uncle who rarely showed up. Everyone else had joined the new chat Aaliyah established, and discussions rarely mentioned Dad unless for logistical arrangements. I wasn't even steering it. It just developed that way. One evening, Griffin visited my place, furious, insisting that Dad's drinking was my fault. I reminded him that I wasn't responsible for Dad's emotional state. He needed to sort his own issues out. When Griffin tried to shove me, I countered. After he swung and missed, I told him to leave, which he did, slamming the door and waking the neighbors. I texted Heather, warning her in case he repeated the same behavior with her. Reactions were mixed. Some thought my stance was overly severe. Others acknowledged it had been a long time coming. No one was entirely happy, yet at least it felt authentic now. Dad's calls continued to pour in, but I let them go to voicemail. Occasionally, Heather texted, expressing her disbelief at what had unfolded. I merely responded with a shrug emoji. Last week, Aaliyah hosted a family gathering at her place. Everyone attended, except for Dad and Griffin. It was peaceful, just board games and pizza, no drama. Mum even laughed for the first time in months. So here we are. Dad is no longer in control. He's no longer the focal point. He can call, scream, or threaten. But I'm not answering. For the first time, it feels like we genuinely have a say in what our family looks like. I'm aware he won't cease his attempts, but I'm not anxious. I'm resolute. There might still be repercussions, but I've come to terms with that. I want him to realize he can't trample over others and continually expect them to return. In my next post, I'll share about a particular voicemail. There's one in particular that made me laugh, not because it was humorous, but due to its sheer obviousness, revealing that he finally understood. Final update. Alright, so it turns out this is the closing chapter. I expected things would simply settle into this new, peculiar normal, but instead, it got even more surreal, the most dad-like way imaginable. If you've ever dealt with someone obsessed with being right, you'll understand what I'm about to describe. It all commenced with the incessant calls, not just a few random missed calls here and there. I'm speaking actual spam levels of communication. One day, I counted 19 calls in a row. Not exaggerating. It wasn't merely standard calls either. He'd call, then FaceTime, follow up with a voicemail, text, and then repeat the cycle. Sometimes he'd even execute that annoying tactic of calling, hanging up before I picked up, then calling again as if I were supposed to come running back. I blocked his number on my main line, and he resorted to contacting me from Griffin's phone, then from Mum's, and even from a bizarre number that I suspected was a burner. One morning, Heather messaged me with a screenshot of Dad texting her about me, saying, "Can you believe your brother won't answer? What's his issue?" She simply replied, "I'm not getting involved," and muted him. Aaliyah sent me a video of her putting her phone on airplane mode since he attempted to call her too, inquiring if I was doing all right. She laughed and quipped, "He's acting as if you've joined a cult or something." Accidentally, I began receiving group messages from him where he'd include me, Griffin, and occasionally my Aunt Deborah, accompanied by lengthy paragraphs about how nobody values family values anymore. The messages were erratic. One moment he discussed Christmas dinners, the next about how he built this family from nothing. At one instance, he sent a picture of the watch I had gifted him just sitting on his kitchen countertop and commented, "I suppose this is all you ever believed I was worth." I didn't even respond. I merely sent the eyes emoji to Heather. Mum finally stopped pretending she didn't notice the going-ons. She dropped by one day with groceries, but didn't mention Dad. Instead, she asked if I wanted leftover lasagna. She remarked, "You know, you don't have to respond to him." I replied, "I know." She shrugged, sat down, and began browsing recipes on her iPad, as if she was just waiting for the noise to fade. Strangely, it felt quite serene. Griffin continued to come at me, stating that, "Congrats, you've defeated Dad. Hope you're content." When I didn't reply, he showed up at my place, banging on the door and departing when I didn't answer. Later, Heather informed me that Griffin was blaming her for supporting me, to which she retorted, "I'm not even on a side. I'm just fed up." What genuinely stunned me was how long Dad maintained this behavior. Weeks of persistent calls. He'd start at 8 in the morning, then again at noon, and later around 7 p.m. At times, he would do this rapid-fire calling, hanging up and calling again repeatedly. It became so tiresome that I ultimately placed my phone on Do Not Disturb most of the time. Then came the voicemail. I didn't play it right away. I was simply exhausted from the entire spectacle. Yet, he followed up with another text stating, "At least you can listen to this." So, against my better judgment, I pressed play while brewing coffee. It was lengthy, nearly 2 minutes. He commenced in his usual fashion, lamenting, "I don't know what happened to you. You were supposed to be better than this," before diving into how I had ruined the family, recounted how he had tried to mold me into a real man and expressed the sacrifices he had made, all to emphasize how I was now squandering it all. Then, he proclaimed, "You think you're punishing me, but you're punishing everyone. You're shattering the entire thing for what? To prove a point?" Then there was a brief stillness, and he finally uttered, "You know what? You win. You wanted me out. You've achieved it. I hope it was worth it. Hope you feel powerful now." Then, simply silence as I could hear him breathing before he hung up. I played it twice, not because I felt remorseful, but because it was bizarre to hear him articulate it aloud, acknowledging he had lost not merely the family dinners, the trust, or whatever else, but the overarching power he held. It was clear that losing that dominance stung him the most, no longer being the center of attention, no more calls for respect. He didn't reach out after that, no calls whatsoever. A couple of brief texts trickled in, "Good luck, and hope you're happy," but then the silence returned. A few days later, Heather visited, bringing her children. She disclosed that Dad was no longer communicating with her, only with Griffin. Aaliyah mentioned she hadn't heard from him since he requested she host a significant family reunion, and she flatly denied. Mum continued her routine of dropping off food every now and then, but never spoke of Dad. Griffin persisted in attempting to stir up the pot on Facebook, yet no one engaged. In truth, things were quiet. Not perfect, but authentic. No one was pretending anymore. People simply moved about their lives. The family group chat became filled with memes and discussions about who would bring what for birthdays, absent of grand speeches or drama. I occasionally, whether Dad is at home, staring at that watch, trying to discern where everything derailed. Often, he doesn't cross my mind at all. I feel no guilt or desire to mend things. Frankly, I don't care if he ever calls again. He mistreated me relentlessly for years, believing he could because it's what his dad had done to him, and he thought it instilled strength or some misinterpreted need for control. He lost it. Ultimately, that's all there is to it. It's not a grand conclusion, no reconciliation, not even a climactic showdown, just silence. At last, I'm not reaching out, not forgiving, not missing it. He can keep the watch, I'll retain my peace.